With the power to bring people together or just help us escape the world, gaming is more than just a game. So join me, Ziggy Chris, as I speak to developers, content creators, and gamers like you and me to discover how each of us was saved by gaming. Welcome in everyone to Saved by Gaming. As always, I am Ziggy Chris, and today's guest is someone who embodies so much of what this podcast is about. Community, acceptance, self-discovery, the list goes on. From YouTube to Twitch, and from personal healing to public advocacy, my guest today is a gaming and beauty creator, transgender advocacy expert, and best of all for me, a 20-year WoW veteran. So please welcome in Stef Sanjati. How are you today? Welcome in, Stef.
Thank you so much. That was such a nice intro. I am great today. Thank you for making the time to chat with me. I'm really excited to be here.
No problem at all. I confess that when I prep for these episodes, there's so many things that go through my head, but I do always prep for guests as best I can, and I'm giving people a glimpse behind the curtain. And the reason I'm doing this is because the biggest part of it is often, where do I start the conversation? And I was reading an article that you did with Elle, and there was a sentence in that kind of caught my attention as like maybe an inspirational point for a springboard, if you like.
Okay.
Because as someone myself who I identify as gender fluid, my journey is quite convoluted, like most people's. And so there was a sentence in there that really rang a bell with me, and I'm sure it rang a bell with a lot of other people, which was you mentioned about playing Pokemon Silver in the early 2000s. And you said that there's a prompt that pops up on the screen asking, are you a boy or a girl? Which kind of reminded me of when I first heard Rebel Rebel by Ziggy Stardust.
Oh, yeah.
And you saying that you remember thinking, how do I know? And I wondered if you could maybe expand off that a bit, because I feel like your journey is interlinked with gaming so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that to me as a child back then, gaming was something I started immediately. A lot of us say this, that I've grown up with a love of gaming when I was like 3, basically. As soon as I could hold a controller, there was one in my hand. And even if it wasn't plugged in, I still thought I was winning. It was like a fun family thing to say, oh, you're winning. And it's sweet, but that's, I guess, where it started for me. And it was always present. So in every single phase of my life and childhood and growing up, there was always this sort of, I guess, love of gaming or background of gaming or something I'd fall back into in my quiet time alone, right? When we reflect, when we think. And gender expression was something that would come up a lot. And I think for me as a child, I always thought everybody had a complicated dynamic with that when they would play a game. What do I pick? What character do I pick? What gender do I pick? But I think realistically for a lot of cis kids, that was probably a lot simpler. And that's not something I really understood till I was much older. But yeah, as early as like the first handheld Pokemon game where you could choose your gender, which I think was Silver, to getting into RPGs when I was a little bit older and being able to customize beyond just that, like it became a vehicle for self-discovery and self-expression that I don't think anything could have replaced that in my development. It was very critical.
Yeah, because I feel like you mentioned that I think for many people that choice in a game in terms of what gender do I play, what character, what type, for most people it might just be on the superficial aesthetics of it.
Right.
But I think for yourself, I know for me growing up and for a lot of people out there, there's an element of it does then raise questions that you've never potentially thought about before, at certain times in your life at least.
Yeah.
In terms of it helping us explore ourselves, the way role-playing, playing those characters, it allows us to explore our boundaries. Did it have that effect for you?
Absolutely. I think for me, I grew up in a very small rural Canadian town, southern Canada, which isn't quite the same as maybe the connotation you'd have with the southern US in terms of culture, but there are some overlaps, especially in rural communities. And so where I grew up, there was really one way to be that was really acceptable. And for young assigned male at birth individuals, that was masculine. I want to play football. I want to play hockey. There was a blueprint that was very narrow. And I know that it wasn't really safe for me to explore that outright immediately in my environment. Like I know as a very young kid, I did play with Barbies and my family got me Barbies. And that was something that was allowed and like accepted and fine by my immediate family. But there was still pressure even in my extended family. Like, this is weird. This is odd. And I remember a very young memory of mine before I understood gender constructs and that maybe somebody, if I was perceived as a boy, would be confused why I had a doll. I remember I was at a mall with my mom and I loved The Little Mermaid and Mulan, but The Little Mermaid more than any other Disney princess. That was my number one. And so I got this Ariel doll at the mall. And I remember sitting in the food court and being so proud and so excited. Like I had this extreme joy, the pride that I felt in like having this. And this was my toy. I loved it so much. And I saw a kid looking at me from across the food court. And I thought he wanted to see what I was so excited about. So I spun the box around to him and he looked at me with the confusion and disgust. And I had no concept of why he would have looked at me like that. And that was the first time I remember thinking like, oh, maybe it's like, what am I doing wrong? Maybe I shouldn't express myself like this. And I had to be like 4, 5, maybe. And so when gaming opened doors for me to explore identity and interests and aesthetics and a sense of self in a safe, enclosed space alone, that was very powerful and very validating. And when, the podcast being called Saved by Gaming, I think that's very one-to-one to my experience. I used to say that World of Warcraft saved my life. It wasn't just WoW was a big part of it, but for sure I relate to that concept because of the quiet time I got to spend by myself, being able to use those games as tools of reflection, introspection, exploration. So important. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. No, I love it. And so there's so many things that I know we're going to bounce back and forth on, but in terms of, obviously, we know, as you touched on there, and if people don't know, I mentioned at the start, you are well known for World of Warcraft. That's one of the main themes that you carry through. And as I mentioned, that's been part of my journey, so I can totally relate, and I'm sure we'll have much to talk on that. Because when we spoke about exploring characters and role-playing through things, for me early on in WoW, that was a factor as well, in terms of making a female character and being able to feel that representation of myself, like in so many computer games. And being in an online community doing that, I think, has a different impact as well to just doing it alone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
What were some of the other elements of what other games growing up? We've touched on Pokemon. Was there other things on your journey that kind of helped you through, or particular touchstones?
Yeah, my earliest gaming memories were on the Super Nintendo console. And I remember we had this living room in my first childhood home, and it had this like extremely bright open air, like bright windows, natural light, bright orange carpet, very interesting space. And I would sit cross-legged in front of this like old cabinet with the old TV inside and the little Super Nintendo controller. And I remember being very moved, and this is such an odd specific example, but I was very moved by Yoshi's Island on Super Nintendo, the theme song. I don't know if you know this song. It's like childlike and silly, but there's something to this day when I hear that song, it stirs emotions in me that I can't explain.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something about that spot on the carpet in front of the console with that like old TV and everything. I know as a kid, I was bullied very early on before any amount of queerness became visible or like tangible or obvious for the way that I looked, because I have a genetic mutation called Waardenburg syndrome, which gives me the white forelock of hair. It gives me very specific facial features, wide set eyes. And so as a kid, even before any other layers were added on, I was alienated pretty early. And I remember it still felt like a safe retreat to go back to that place on the carpet and play my video games. Yoshi's Island stands out in my memory. Not Gauntlet Dark Legacy, Gauntlet Legends on the PS1. I played the Archer, and I loved that because she was fierce and she was a beautiful woman, and I loved playing that character. The Valkyrie as well, and I did that again for Gauntlet Dark Legacy on the GameCube. And those games, just something about them just gripped me. I think honestly it was the character that I got to play. It felt like such a power fantasy, of like a feminine power fantasy that wasn't. Those characters had some interesting outfits, but something about it just made me feel very excited and powerful and safe. But I would say where things really started to snowball with gaming and games that really resonated for me would have been Bethesda titles as early as Morrowind, The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. I played on PC. I think I was like 9, maybe younger. And I would get into the creation kit. I don't remember what it was called, but like basically the world editor, like the game engine where you could mod the game. And I would just play around in there and I'd make myself as like a woman and I'd put her in a little house and I'd be like, this is where I live. And it was just this weird creative outlet to explore a version of myself that I wanted to see in the future that at the time, I couldn't really comprehend it like that. But those creative tools in RPGs, whether it was in the game itself or out of the game, felt just so powerful. So Elder Scrolls, Fallout, World of Warcraft, of course, any game where I could make a character, customize a character, fighting games where I could play as women, or even like Soul Calibur. I loved the Soul Calibur games because you could create custom characters. And so
You
I'd
could.
create these original female characters that I'd play in every game. And in hindsight, really, these women and these characters were just projections of myself that I
Hmm.
wanted to see. And there was always the sort of three archetypes. There was like the agile, stealthy rogue woman. There was like the sort of buff, burly paladin woman, warrior woman, and then usually some kind of spellcaster. But those archetypes of femininity that I would construct for myself in those spaces kept reappearing in every game that I would play through my
Hmm.
adolescence. And I would say that was very significant that I would carry it with me to those different titles.
Yeah. And all that you mentioned, all those early games that were impactful or touchstones growing up. But then obviously you found World of Warcraft, I believe, around the age of 11. Would that be right?
About
Okay.
9. But I have one character that I've played consistently since I was 11. So that window for sure.
Okay, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
So what period of Warcraft are we in at this point in terms of expansions or releases? Where are we?
The absolute beginning, the one like 2004, the release.
Okay. Just,
Was,
yeah, that's
I was
around the
9.
time I was in. Before Burning Crusade, even right at the start.
Yeah.
Cool. And so what was it about that for you that was captivating, and then how has that impacted you?
Originally, I wanted to play it because when I was a bit younger, I had watched my brother play Warcraft 2, Orcs and Humans, right? Like the original RTSs. And I remember being really scared of the orcs. But when Warcraft 3 came out and my brother showed me that one, I saw that there were these night elves and there were these like beautiful warrior women that were really fierce and strong and scary, but I wasn't afraid of them. I wanted to be them. So I fell in love with Warcraft 3 kind of on my own through that. And I would just come home from school every day and go on to the like BattleNet multiplayer and play custom games like Winter Mall, or gosh, there were so many, Footman Frenzy. Like I just loved them all. I just loved playing these like odd little multiplayer things. I wasn't very good at the actual RTS gameplay because I was so young, but I loved the world and the characters and the atmosphere. So when World of Warcraft came out later, my brother was in and I was in by extension because I just loved the things that he loved at the time. I really admired him and looked up to him, and we had a great relationship growing up. That kind of naturally led me there, but very quickly it became, I developed my own relationship with WoW, especially. And I think what it was is, again, I was bullied very young for a variety of things, whether that was Wardenburg syndrome or as soon as I hit puberty, like my weight and acne. And then, of course, like I just gradually became more visibly queer and I couldn't really help it. There was no blending in that I could do. It just wasn't happening. What WoW allowed me to do as that kid was to go outside basically and explore. Because I would say from the age of 11, I just stopped going outside. It wasn't safe for me to do that, especially once I got into high school. It just wasn't an option. I would have people essentially bring violence to my door, like trash thrown on the lawn, my family's vehicles, tires slashed, and spray painted slurs on the side of the vehicle. Like it was bad. It was a very bad environment. And so I would come home from school. I lived 5 minutes away, but I got a ride both ways because it wasn't safe for me to walk. And I would log into WoW and I'd go outside, was a way that it felt to me. I could go anywhere in the world. I could be anybody. Nobody would harass me. And I could just live, basically. And I often did play by myself. I sometimes would play with my brother or his friends. But just being allowed to be alone in the world was something that I desperately needed at that time. And I got it through WoW. Throughout those teenage years where I couldn't get it in reality, unfortunately. And in that way, I do feel like that game saved me during that time. I don't know how I would have gotten through that time period without it. And all the while it's enabling this sort of safe actual exploration externally, it's also enabling this sort of safe exploration internally. So it was a very powerful kind of pillar for me growing up, and nothing really can quite hold a candle to the impact that it had on me. While other games definitely have had impacts on me, that one has been so consistent. And to this day, I still find myself growing and learning about who I am and who I want to be through the way I engage with World of Warcraft as recently as like this month. It's constant.
Yeah, that's impressive. And so I think there's so many things you touched on that are relevant to so many people, regardless of whether you are in the LGBTQ community or anything else, because to put that into perspective, for myself growing up, even before anything else, I had kidney problems as a youngster. So I was in and out of hospital a lot. So gaming and movies was an outlet because, again, I got bullied for different reasons, but because I was not in school a lot and people thought I would be skiving or doing other things. And it
I
just led
see.
to all these other aspects. And like you, I don't mind sharing these things because I think it's good and it's powerful for people to understand that they are not alone in the world, that these
Yeah.
things go on. And that the whole point of this pod is to connect on these themes where, yes, you still have to go and face you. We're not saying you have to leave it all behind and just hide forever. You still need to face these things, but
Absolutely.
it's also good to have these kind of therapeutic outlets to explore your passions, your identity, or whatever it is about yourself that you need to just take a step back from the world for a moment.
Yeah. If I actually, I liked something you said there is you still have to tackle the problem essentially. You still have to face those demons, for lack of a better word. And I think something that happened for me around like 2020 when COVID was growing initially was I definitely returned to using gaming as a retreat. Like I became very isolationist. And something I had to do over the years following with a lot of support and help from like my partner and my friends and therapy was learn to deal with those problems again. So I very much am a huge proponent of gaming as a therapeutic tool or as something to I will never stop being a gamer. Like it's so intrinsic, but I do think it's also important to be uncomfortable and to walk into the hard things and do them anyway, face down a challenge. And when I mentioned that I'm still finding ways to learn about myself through engaging with World of Warcraft, I guess that's been the latest lesson for me is like moving through discomfort and challenge and adversity and growing is so important.
And so, when you were exploring WoW, at what point did finding a kind of online community through that become part of that package, or did that come later in terms of finding like minds online? Because for some people, that's an element of that, or was that not a factor for you?
I think for me, unfortunately, in the early 2000s, there was still quite a bit of rampant bigotry in
Mm.
online gaming spaces. And so I didn't fully feel safe or interested in engaging in online communities. However, very early when I was still very little, there was one guild that I remember so fondly and it was such a family, I guess. It was a guild called Kith on the
Mm.
Realm Feathermoon. And I remember there were these two officers in the guild, I believe, named Danvi and Conros, and they were like the guild aunt and uncle. And I would constantly be going to them with questions and like they would, if I got upset about something, they would help me calm down and walk me through it. And so there was definitely an online community where I felt like I belonged initially. That guild eventually moved on to another MMO. And from that point on, I really just spent time with my brother up until I started looking for community when I was about 13 on YouTube.
Mm.
And I started uploading YouTube videos about makeup and just about me doing really silly things. YouTube back then, I'm sure you were there. I'm sure it was a different kind of platform. It wasn't commercial or like show based. It was like somebody might upload a 30-second clip of them eating an apple and doing something silly. It was more like TikTok, honestly, back then. And so I would just upload. And eventually that turned into beauty videos, finding the beauty community on YouTube, finding queer people in that space. And that's where I really started to connect with people online. And it wasn't until I was a successful YouTuber myself, much later, and I released a video talking about how World of Warcraft saved my life. And I started a guild called the Bread Squad, which was what my community was called on YouTube. That was a very meaningful community to me. And that was the first time I got like an ahead of the curve rating achievement. And my brother came in to raid lead, but there was a community of people that were mostly LGBT or in some way faced marginalization in their life. And we came together and we gamed in a way that was comfortable and safe and it felt really good. I was very young at this time. I was in my early 20s. And so I unfortunately I lost interest with the game for a short time. I walked away and then the guild sort of fell apart because I essentially abandoned it, which I feel very bad about because it did mean a lot to me. And I think at the time I didn't know how to fit that into my life. But since then, I've got another community that I've been running for upwards of 5 years since Battle for Azeroth expansion came out. And that has been, I would say it's like one of the most important facets of my life from a social perspective, from a community perspective, from like friendships and community and like belonging. That guild, Sovereign Steel, the community that I run with my partner and our friends, that is, to me, it's my close community. And I can't imagine my life without it right now. So, in the way, if you're asking me about community, online community, and gaming, I guess that's all the shapes it's taken, but it's definitely important to me at this point.
Yeah. And you touched there on the fact that you did YouTube for a while more as a platform, and you were doing different content now in terms of you doing a lot more stuff about yourself and your journey
Yeah.
and all that kind of thing, and more of the beauty aspect. And I'm aware that at some point you shifted away from that to focus more on the gaming space.
Yeah.
In terms of that shift, if you don't mind me asking, what was it that made you decide to bring that to the fore? Because it's clearly always been a part of you behind the scenes, if it wasn't always as vocal. You did the odd video on it, but it's not always been the forefront.
Definitely. I think originally I saw gaming as this part of myself that I wanted to keep safe from criticism. It was like the inner child that I wanted to shield when I was younger. And what was in my youthful naivete, I exposed much more personal things about myself. And I'm sure that at the time I had reasons for this. But it felt like I need to keep this thing safe, but the rest of it, I've already been harassed to hell and back about it. Whatever. Let me just talk about it, was the thought at the time. And that was things like my gender identity, my transition, I guess my personal feelings and thoughts about current events, politics. I was very expressive. And I remember actually one of my first magazine interviews I ever did was for a fashion magazine in Canada. And the first line in that story was Stef Sanjati is the definition of an open book. And I always think back to that and I laugh now because it was true. But when I made the pivot to gaming, if I was an open book, I closed completely. Like I was shut. And at the time, I was going through a lot of emotional processing. I was looking back on my life, I'd reached a point of stability and I didn't really know how to handle all the things that I'd gone through. And I had not a good time. It was not a good time. And I think I just wanted to hide and close up. And gaming was something I did really love and I did want to share it with people. I wanted to share other things too, but I couldn't. I just wasn't able to anymore. So the pivot to gaming happened. I was very excited about it. I really wanted to do it. My boyfriend helped me a lot. It's been at this point 5 years we're together, and he's now my co-host. Like he runs the show with me. But it started because I had to retreat and figure out who I was. Because I'd started YouTube when I was 13, and I just kept going until I was 23, 24. A lot of very public, like I transitioned publicly. I grew up very public, and I made a lot of, I wouldn't say like devastating mistakes, but I just was a messy young person on the internet. That's not something when when things come into focus and you look back at some of the stuff that you did on camera, it's not like I did anything that was horrible. I'm like, oh, I would have carried myself like differently. How did I want people to feel about me? Who did I want to be? So that was when the shift to gaming happened. But I will say, by exploring that avenue, even if it started from a place of wanting to feel safer, it quickly turned into something very passionate and very expressive and very life-saving and helpful and therapeutic, but also empowering. Like it just became its own thing. And I'm very grateful that I made that switch. And where I'm at now, when I describe myself as a beauty and gaming creator, I'll say when I first made the transition to gaming, I actually threw away, I'd say 99% of my cosmetics. I had an enormous cosmetics collection. And I was so resentful of the person that I was, I literally threw it down a garbage chute. And there's a lot that you can, if you look at that through a therapeutic lens, it's, woo, okay. And I have, trust me, I'm a huge proponent of it, often frequent therapy. But I guess there's something that's been very healing about coming back to this point and now beauty and gaming together, bridging those worlds. Like I get to do that every day and it feels very sincere. It feels very honest. It feels very right. So that's where I'm at.
No, it's all good. And I will say not to be too lighthearted, because when I'm not being a beautiful boy, I'm a beautiful tom girl, as I say. I like to joke.
That's
So please don't ask me to throw away my makeup because I've got too much and I don't want to do that.
No, never.
But obviously, those are massive shifts that you've made in your life. And like you say, there was so much you did publicly. Yeah. And now, do you feel you found your space now, that you're comfortable, that you've accepted, or you've opened up this gaming was, the gaming, if you like, sounded like it was yours and it was something you kept to be yours, to be your little thing. And now that is a big part of your public persona now.
Yeah.
But you're comfortable in it, like you're happy that's now, you feel you feel yourself?
Yeah, I do. And I do share a lot of my gaming. I do some gaming off stream that I don't really talk about.
We all do.
I think, it's more so what I'm trying to achieve with gaming. from like a creator perspective and from my shows on Twitch is specific. I'm trying to do competitive Mythic Plus and World of Warcraft with my community, with my partner. I'm trying to grow as a competitive player, and I'm trying to create community for everybody, but certainly marginalized individuals in the gaming space to just come and actually play and try to strive for excellence in gameplay. Sometimes, and what I used to do with my community originally was it was the cozy campfire, and it was very much about come here and we'll shield you and each other from the harshness of the world, which escapism, right? And I think there was a place for that, especially 2020. But eventually I felt like I outgrew the need to be sheltered, and I didn't want to shelter others either. Instead, I wanted to say, no, let's link arms and let's go up to the thing that's scaring us and let's do it. And for me, when it comes to competitive gaming, for example, when I met my boyfriend, I could not play Sea of Thieves multiplayer, right? Like people will randomly PvP you, or Halo, for example. Again, PvP open lobbies, unranked, just relaxed, casual, competitive gameplay. I would have anxiety attacks. I'd start crying. Like I couldn't handle the feeling of, to me, it felt like violence and fear. And I think that was something I really had to process. But now, I guess, when I think about, facing reality and overcoming those feelings and just doing things, there was a time when I would have believed about myself, whether subconsciously or consciously, that I didn't belong in a competitive WoW space, or I couldn't do Mythic Plus or Mythic Raid in WoW because I was a trans woman or even just a woman. And that's not something I would have ever applied to somebody else, but it was like a internalized negative belief, right? And being able to say, no, I'm just going to figure it out. I'm going to go in there and do it, and I'm going to fail, and I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to fail, and I'm going to do it again until I get it. That's not something I ever got to develop as a youth, but it's something that I got to develop now as an adult through gaming.
But the first part of that you touched on, so let's split that into two. In terms of community, whilst it's no longer, obviously, you've shifted slightly from the cozy campfire, but have you had, in terms of your actual community now, stories or feedback or positive messages of how your community has impacted those within it? Have you got any kind of, obviously, there's certain things you might not want to divulge, but any stories you can share from that side of things?
For sure. I think there's been specific feedback, but I also just get to see week after week people grow. And I guess the way that I run the guild in WoW and the raid team, and I don't do it alone. I've got some great officers in the guild, and my partner Travis helps me with all the stuff as well. It's like a little council of leaders, really. And one of the things that we do with the raid team, for example, is we have data that we look at, and we look at people's performance week after week. And we always open ourselves to saying, if you want feedback on your performance, let us know. And what is so exciting to me is getting to see a player that maybe would never have felt safe to participate in a harder difficulty setting, or like even raiding or Mythic Plus or whatever, whether that was because of their background or because of the way they used to be treated, or frankly, the WoW community can be pretty toxic at times, especially in those competitive spaces. To see them just be able to go into that place and then try and maybe struggle, but then try again and be better, and try again and be better, and try again and be better. There's hard data that I get to look at that shows that. And then I hear it in their voice when they get more confident, when they're able to call things out. And that is very meaningful to me. But then I do also have people come to me and tell me like, oh, this community matters a lot to me because it's so comfortable, or I don't have to worry about just seeing slurs in guild chat randomly. Like I do hear that from people as well. When people are given a space where they feel comfortable to try, they do grow. When people are in spaces where they don't feel comfortable to fail in front of people, they just stop, or they leave, or they feel like, oh, I can't do this. I can't grow in this way. So certainly I've seen that impact, and I've heard it from people, and it means a lot to me to witness that or hear that from community members.
Yeah. And the second part of the section you were doing before was about, because we were talking about how WoW's not the only thing you play other games in your personal life.
Yeah.
And what are some of the games off stream at them? It can be in recent years or currently that kind of help you, because it can't always be WoW. Like you said, there's other things you want to explore. What are some other touch points for you, just as that's casual or support you or get you through?
You mean like other games?
Other
Examples?
games, sorry, or they can be if you do you play tabletop?
Oh,
Do you
cool.
do anything? We talk about because you mentioned as well in terms of games can be therapy. They literally can because if you haven't checked out the episode, people then go check it out because we had on the chairman of Games Therapy UK, and they
Okay.
literally use Dungeons and Dragons to help people get through post-traumatic stress and all these different
Yeah.
things. So we cover tabletop and
Yeah.
computer games and all these things. So yeah, if there's anything else,
I've dabbled in tabletop. I can't say I've really gotten to experience it in the full way that I want to. But what I really like about tabletop, and this does resonate with some of the ways that I've engaged in PC or console gaming, is the analog nature and the kind of inherent patience required to engage in something that's very manual. There's no automatic system where a window pops up and tells you how you did. You sit there and you think about it, you talk about it with others. I think there's a very connecting element to that. And what I try to do is take those principles that I have briefly experienced in tabletop gaming and apply it to the way that I engage in multiplayer or PC or MMO or whatever. Is that patience element, like just sitting with something for a second, is not something that I was very good at previously. And when I was using gaming to escape from my feelings, don't recommend it, but we all have done it at some point, most likely. Having to stop and wait for something for even a minute it could feel intolerable when there was something that you're running away from, right? So I love the analog, slow pace of tabletop that it can have. And I think that there's a lot to be said for applying that in other gaming settings. And I've experienced a lot of positive growth from trying to do that myself.
yeah, and there's something to be said. I've helped run a guild in WoW. It's not an easy feat, so I totally respect
No,
you for doing it for so long as well,
thank
because
you. Thank
honestly,
you.
I did it for not as long as you, and it was exhausting. But some of those things do carry across, like you said, in terms of making sure everyone, if you're running D&D at the table, is making sure everyone's getting a turn, everyone gets a moment in
Yeah.
the limelight, everyone's getting their moment to shine. And there's an element of that within the guild as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. And something we're adding to our schedule right now, there's 2 raid nights a week, 3 hours each, so 6 hours of raiding that I'm running.
Mhm.
And I'm at capacity between that and streaming and like my other elements of my work. And my partner always has to tell me to, hey, can you take a second to just do something relaxing for yourself? And I'm like, okay, I'll try. And I really appreciate him doing that. So what has been nice lately is we're starting this new thing, a third raid day on Sunday that I'm not running.
Ooh.
And I'm thinking about it almost like a raid leadership mentor program, more or less, where somebody's going to get to come in and learn to raid lead, right? And I'll be with them for maybe 2 or 3 weeks of raid nights, and then I'm going to let them take it away. And when we talk about, oh, making sure everybody gets a turn at the table or everybody getting a spot in the limelight, and wow, there's 3 raid difficulties. You've got normal, heroic, mythic. And where we're at with the core roster of the guild is heroic is something we can handle very easily, and mythic is something we want to push up into. But normal, I still want to make sure that people in the community that want to stay in that bracket or maybe are still learning or practicing to feel more comfortable beyond that bracket, I want to make sure there's still space for that. And absolutely, I think when I look at the community and my intentions with it and the people that are helping me run it, I think we all see what it can offer people when that mindfulness is applied, making sure everybody gets, I guess, a place where they can feel achievement. And that's very important to me to facilitate that. Like what you described with D&D feels very one to one or it feels very transferable. It's very interesting.
You have to play a game with us sometimes.
I
Then
would love to.
you'll experience it for yourself. It'll be
Yes.
virtual from unless I visit Canada again, but yeah. Perfect. So let's touch on some other points in terms of okay, one of the things I always ask people, and so
Mhm.
it's only fair to ask everyone the same couple of questions at some point
Okay.
is if we were to give you a moment, like a momentary gaming doctor's license, unofficial Dr. Stef, okay?
Okay.
What is your gaming prescription for someone, whatever, let's say they're going through a tough time? What's your gaming prescription? It doesn't have, I'm
Ooh,
presuming WoW may be on the top of the list, but it doesn't have to be WoW. It could be something unexpected.
this is tough. Okay. I think different points in my life, I would have answered this very differently.
Hmm.
I'm going to answer this in a way that I hope people will understand if I describe it, which is, I guess this is through my own lens of experience and what I've struggled with and what I had to overcome. But my prescription would be for an individual that is maybe having trouble moving through discomfort. And discomfort could be distress to an extent, would be Zomboid. Have you heard
Oh,
of this game?
I don't think
Okay.
I've played it, but I know it.
I'm in love with it. It's so brutal and hard. But here's the thing. I feel like learning to tolerate failure or frustration is such an important skill in getting out of situations that are causing distress or harm. For me, I wasn't dealing with my problems, right? And so when I'd game, I would play easy games that wouldn't challenge me because I just wanted to feel relief. But what I found for myself was that created this feedback loop of just constant seeking of comfort. And then I never moved to challenge my problems. And so learning to tolerate failure and difficulty in games helped me learn to tolerate failure and difficulty or adversity or challenge in real life. And so my prescription would be Project Zomboid to just fail and try again. And it's inevitable that you lose. The whole intro to the game is this is how you died in the zombie apocalypse. And so for me, it's not will I fail, it's when will I fail and how. And I think there's something, in my opinion, therapeutic about learning to accept that you will fail or something will go wrong, something will hurt you at some point. How do you handle that feeling and how do you move on from it? Now, I'm obviously not a licensed doctor, so that's just my opinion. But
Yeah, this is not legit. Don't worry, everyone.
yeah.
It's just a bit of fun. But I feel you, and it's interesting as well for the same reasons. I had someone on the other week, and they were talking about Elden Ring, but in the same perspective of failure,
Absolutely.
overcoming, the repeated failure, the finding salvation in finally beating the challenge. So, you've hit the same
Awesome.
note.
I love
Yeah.
to hear that. I actually became familiar with that concept by watching somebody's video essay on Dark Souls.
Oh, there we go.
So it's perfect.
Yeah. All right. So let's give you some more fun ones. So,
Okay.
Quickfire, game that feels like a warm hug.
Ooh, game that feels like a warm hug. Stardew Valley has to come to mind. If it's Quickfire, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Game that made you cry.
Oh, it's been a while.
I'll tell you one for me while you're
Sure.
thinking. It made me cry the first time anyway, because it was The Last of Us. The bit towards the end of The Last of Us when the giraffe, not spoilers anyone, it's a really old game now, come on. Like the scene with the giraffe. And
Okay.
now, the only time I've played it again since, we're an adoptive family, we have 2 adopted children. And so playing The Last of Us, or The Last of Us 2 now, as an adoptive parent is even more powerful. Because
can imagine.
he essentially adopts Ellie. Like it's that relationship. So that made me cry for that reason.
That's really powerful. You know what? Now that I think about it, the most recent game that made me cry was actually Cyberpunk 2077. And I found myself so moved by the characters, the writing of those characters. Incredible. I would cry at side quests in that game, let alone some of the early main quests, which I think the game's still new enough. I don't want to spoil it, but if you played Cyberpunk, you know what I'm saying. You
I know,
what I'm
yeah,
talking.
I know what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah, I love that game.
Yeah.
Okay, game character you'd love to have dinner with.
Okay, this is hard. There's like that kind of zany engineer woman in Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Oh, okay.
I don't even remember her name, but she just seems like she'd be fun to hang out with.
I don't know either, so people can just put it in
Yes,
the comments.
please.
That'd be great.
I should know
Um,
her name.
You should. Last one of these little bits. One underrated game that you think deserves more love.
Dungeon of the Endless. Top down, pixel art, roguelike dungeon crawler. This game challenged my ability to collaborate with my partner. We played it in the first few months of our relationship, and I think it was such a team building exercise. My God, Dungeon of the Endless. I cannot recommend it enough. Play it with a significant other or a best friend, a sibling, whatever, and just try to get along and collaborate. Good luck.
Okay, you heard it.
Try to beat it. Try to
Try
beat
to
it.
beat it. And so, also, while we're in this last section, one of the questions, again, I always ask people is if you would like to hear someone else's saved story, it could be someone you know, it could be someone you admire from a distance. Is there another gamer or whoever out there that you think, actually, I think they've got a really good save story that I'd like to hear?
Interesting. I have a co-host that I stream with on a brand channel twice a week. And her name's Anna. She's such a wonderful person. She's so much fun to host with. she's been a gamer her whole life. And I would love to hear her story with gaming and how maybe it impacted her growing up. I was like, is there like a celebrity or like an influencer or a creator that I look up to? But Anna came to mind right away. That would be my answer. My
That,
friend Anna.
that's fair. There's so many things that I know I won't have time to ask you about today, but I think one of the things that I just wanted to like refocus on is the fact that we touched on earlier about how gaming, you mentioned it as well in the article I read about, became a very natural way to interact because it became an opportunity to explore identity choice and freedom and all these kind of things. And so I guess I just want to emphasize to anyone listening is that I feel like a big part of that sentence just reminded me about how the games allow people, all of us, to explore that sense of self and that push our boundaries a little bit in a safe environment and maybe figure out a little bit who we are. Do you feel that has been a big part of this journey for you in terms of gaming allowing you to explore those boundaries a little bit?
Absolutely. I do think that gaming throughout my life has allowed me to explore myself and push my boundaries depending on what I need at the time. But something that I think about is that no matter who we are in the world, we're born into a circumstance and a place and a time. And there's always limits on what our real life can truly show us or provide to us as far as perspective. And there are a myriad of ways to get perspective on the internet nowadays. And some of them are good, some of them are bad. But I think what's really powerful about gaming is that it's exclusively an internal experience when you're reflecting on what a game is showing you, or you're reflecting on what a game is asking you. Are you a boy or a girl? There's no Twitter feed beside that showing you what people think of that question. It's just you and the game. And I think there's something extremely powerful about going into a space, a digital space, a game, maybe it's a tabletop game, and just being open to what it has to show you and thinking about that and seeing where it leads you, because that could lead you with exploring identity. It could lead you to, and it doesn't even have to be gender identity. It can be like, oh, I want to start a garden. And then you discover your most loved hobby for the next 30 years of your life. Like, it doesn't have to always be something intense, dramatic, heavy, or core. It can be something light and lovely coming into your life. It can be anything, or it can be learning to sit with discomfort. But gaming has a lot to offer beyond just pure entertainment. And that's something I wish more people to see and experience.
Yeah, totally resonate with that. And I'm a child of the 80s. Growing up, it was even more difficult at times to explore or talk about certain things
Right.
because, we've come a very long way in terms of certain conversations. And so I think, yeah, likewise, it wasn't until the 2000s some of these things you could explore and then beyond start to explore them in a safer space. And
Yeah.
so finding your tribe is a big part of that as well, right? You talk about whether it's your community or many other great streamers or creators out there that are bringing people together in a safe
Yes.
space. So yeah, I get that. And so whether people are exploring on their own, which is great, or they find their tribe, that's what this is all about.
Yes. A big agree.
But when I came to you with the theme, was there just
Mhm.
anything with the theme that you thought about?
Just the theme of Saved by Gaming. I know immediately when I got your first email and when you reached out and you asked if I'd come on the show and have a chat, it was like such an immediate yes, just from the title, and then of course everything else was great, but I just knew immediately there was a conversation to be had around that, because I haven't just been saved by gaming once. It's been over and over. And I am very grateful that I've been able to have that experience. And I genuinely cannot see who I would have been if I didn't have the privilege and the opportunity to play games as a kid and growing up. Like, it was so core. So I appreciate that you're having these conversations. Thank you for asking me to be a part of the conversation with you. And I hope that whether it's this conversation or others on your podcast, I hope that a viewer somewhere can walk away feeling, oh, I'm going to try that game, or, oh, I played this game and it changed me in this way. And that's really profound. I love it when we get deep about games as nerds, as gamers. I think that's what it's all about to me. It's not about the score. It's not about being the best in the season. If my competitive brain, it really does always come back to the self and the core and the feeling of community. There's something so pure about that. I just want more spotlight on that in the world. And so I'm glad you're doing this.
Thank you. Thank you. And to quote one of my previous guests, Sam Hollis, he said as well, it doesn't matter about the lore of a game. It doesn't matter about the rules or whatever. It's how it makes you feel at the end of the day. So it doesn't
Absolutely.
matter what other people are spouting off about things. You don't have to get hung up
No.
on that. It's about how it makes you feel. That's all that
Yes.
matters.
Have your own personal experience with it always. Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay.
Awesome.
Obviously, you can find Steph on all her socials. I'll put all of that in the description. You can hear about my own WoW journey. I will link that in here as well because literally, the WoW community, like we said, every community can have some negatives, but my side of the WoW community was really impactful at a very difficult time. Big love to you guys. And if there's anyone that I knew from the fraternity and the Shatar out there, you guys rocked back in the day. I gave up around Cataclysm. That's when I gave up, by the way, from like original WoW to Cataclysm.
That was a good time.
It was a good
That
time.
was a good time.
Yeah. Anyway, everyone, thank you very much for being here. Steph, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And just remember, everyone, no matter what you're doing out there, remember to always hit save. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This show was brought to you by me, Ziggy Chris. So thanks very much for listening. You know how to do podcast things by now. So if you liked this, push the button, tell your friends, do all that jazz, and we'll see you next time. Take care.